Welcome back to Limited Supply, the podcast where we get deep into the tactical and strategic side of e-commerce, digital marketing, and building consumer brands. I'm your host, Nick Sharma. I've spent the last 9 years building, scaling, and investing in brands. And through this show and my weekly newsletter at nick.co/email, I'm here to share everything I've learned. The wins, the losses, the experiments, the tactics, and the insights, all so you can unlock your next $100,000 in revenue. Today's episode is a good one, but before we dive in, let me tell you about our chosen sponsor for this week's episode. If you're a D2C operator and TV feels like a black box, that's because most platforms give you 20% of the actual available inventory and none of the measurement to see if it even works. On the other hand, with Tatari, you can buy linear and streaming directly, plus you can measure it like a digital channel. That's the reason over 400 brands like Manscaped, Tecovas, and Chime run performance TV using Tatari. See how they leverage the platform at nick.co/Tatari. That's nik.co/TATARI. Welcome back to another episode of Limited Supply. I'm your host, Nick Sharma, and today we've got a very fun episode. We've had Cody Plofker, the former CEO of Jones Road Beauty, on the podcast before, and today I've got him back, and we're really diving into what was their unlock on how they scaled so fast. You know, how did they get past the point of diminishing returns on Meta and continue to build awareness and drive people into the funnel and drive them down the funnel? And, you know, I think multiple years in a row, they were a top seller on Black Friday across the entire Shopify network. So Cody knows exactly what he's doing, especially when it comes to filling the funnel and flushing the funnel. So that was today's episode, and I'm very excited to give that to you here. Let me know what you think. If you've got any questions, hit up myself or Cody on Twitter, and enjoy the episode. All right, Cody, welcome to another episode of Limited Supply. It's great to have you back. First of all, how's everything been since last time? I know you've got a couple of big life updates.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I feel like it's been like 2 years, which is an eternity. So probably got at least one kid since then, and probably about a month ago stepped down as CEO of Jones Road. So still involved on the board and still advising, but no longer day to day. Which is great. Something definitely I'm excited about, happy about. Proud of everything we did, but I'm excited to do some new things and advise a bunch of brands and maybe start some new ones. So yeah, it's been good.
Amazing. Yeah, congrats on all that. We'll have to do another episode where we also just catch up on all things AI and all the things that we've been tinkering on the side.
Oh, we should definitely do that
and show some of the people that. But excited today to have you here. And I think today I really want to focus on a channel that we've been talking about over the last couple months, especially as we think about going into Q4 in a big way, which is TV. So I'm curious, just to start, right? You built the entire Jones Road engine on paid social notoriously, especially using, the Bobby Brown video creative kind of first person approach. But you did all of this without ever really touching a TV budget. And I'm curious why you think that background, leading as somebody who built on digital and then came to TV, why you think that's the best kind of persona to talk to today about what it's actually like to go into TV.
Well, we did, and then we didn't. Like, we were obviously very paid social, and like me just like not knowing any better, I was like, oh, TV's for, you got to be a big brand, and like we got to get to a certain size and be, hundreds of millions. Didn't know how easy it was, but I didn't really know any better. So I was just like, let me just keep going on paid social. That was like what I knew. That was, my bread and butter, and it worked and it worked and it worked. And then eventually it doesn't, where you got to reach new people. And we definitely, like, not that we ever had like a flat year, but like we would hit, a month where we felt like there was like a little plateau, and it's like, okay, we have to go and do some other things. And reach new people is really the biggest one, right? You can't just paid social. You're running same strategies. You're going to run out of who you can reach. And TV is really, especially with where our demo is and was like a natural fit. I mean, when we launched it, it was huge. Like, we probably had like 50% like year over year growth, and like just like some pretty crazy results, which I was not expecting at the gate. So yeah, it's been big. I mean, we had at one point we were probably spending like 25% of our mix on TV. So it's also one of those channels that can really scale. So it's been great, and it's still a pretty big part of our mix today.
Has the kind of like the rise of TV ads, I feel like as Jones Road kind of got super mature, It was kind of at that sweet spot timing where also a bunch of other larger brands really took the leap into TV. Did that also just give you confidence that it's the right channel to go and test out?
I was confident because our demo was definitely on there. I knew that. I knew that if it was able to work, there was significant scale there. It wasn't like we're going to put all of our effort in something that could only spend $1,000 or $2,000 a day on. Um, I think it also gives you a little bit of trust, credibility. Like there's a lot of trust of being on TV. Like not every brand can do that, so it kind of makes you seem like you're a little bit of a bigger brand. And I also I don't know that I would start like TV in the beginning when launching a brand, but I think the benefit of social is you're able to really get product market fit and test a lot. Like a lot of our best TV ads, they were actually organic social TikToks, like with Bobby. And then we would just turn them into ads, edit them, shoot them for ads. So like by the time we did go and do a TV shoot, like we felt very confident in a lot of the strategy. And now it was just scaling it and bringing it to a new channel.
Yeah, I love that. I remember that was how I first got started on TV too, was like basically figuring out the angles that work best on that cold Facebook traffic and then figure out how to merge it in with a TV piece of creative as well. Um, all right, I want to talk about, actually, before we get into the next chapter, isn't it funny how you've seen all these TV companies come out of nowhere with these crazy offers and try to recruit you with like $500 and spend?
I've seen some slightly larger offers than that, but yeah.
Yeah, they're all trying to start, basically see who can get you on with the lowest, like barrier to entry, basically. But I feel like it's a bad judge of character when you're starting TV.
Yeah, and it only goes so far. I mean, those credits will go away. Really, what we're all after is value and performance, and a huge part of that is having access to the right inventory. That's a big part.
Totally.
Obviously, having it's not like paid social as much as some of these other vendors will try to say it is, but it's not just like you can toss it in an ASC and hands off. Like there is a lot more strategy and skill, and like I feel credible to speak on the overall concept of TV, how to, like I wrote our TV ads, I wrote all of them, like involved in production, measurement. But that being said, like I've never actually successfully bought TV. And I think you need somebody who really understands that because it's a very different skill set and just like experience set compared to like a paid social.
Yeah, totally. We can't forget attribution. You're the king of attribution wars. All right, so going into TV now. So you just talked about this a little bit, but I'm curious. Like when people hear advertising on TV, they usually think either I'm going to do a quick DSP sign up, and spend a few $100 and see if I can drive some traffic, and try to use this, TV ad unit, or I'm going to go spend 100 grand on a piece of creative and then do a huge national buy. So I'm curious, like for you guys, when you started, way before you ramped up to a quarter of your paid budget going to TV, how did you guys start and approach testing the channel in a way where like you as a performance marketer felt like this was going to hit stat sig, not just, all right, let's test it with a few grand and see what happens and then go from there?
Yeah, and I'm Sean. I would love to hear what you guys recommend and have to say about this. But we worked with an agency who's very close Tatari partner, household. Still work with them today. Nick, you actually introed me to Greg. Awesome guy, awesome agency. And so his recommendation, and I totally agree with like any mistakes I've had launching new channels in the past was like kind of dabbling, and you don't need to go and do a $250,000 production and spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands to prove it out, but you also can't, go with no creative and then spend $500 and shut it off, right? Like you do have to do it. So his recommendation, and I think it was partly based on the size of the brand we were at, like we were actually pretty established, then. And so we needed a little bit more budget to kind of see some signal compared to where we were at. So we did a production. We tried to always keep things lean and stuff. So it wasn't like a 200K production. It was probably like 50K, but we got like 8 assets out of it. Right. So good amount to test. And again, like we felt like they were relatively proven, at least in the market, not on TV. And then I think we went with like 200K, 150K, 200K over a month. And we're like, we're going to spend that. We're going to commit to it, no matter what. So that was what we went with. Sean, I'm curious, like what you guys normally recommend.
Yeah, a couple of things you said there really resonate. I mean, there isn't a one size fits all, and it's going to kind of depend on where the brand's at and what the available budget is. The more you can spend early on, the more you can learn, right? And achieve those stat sig results and then scale more quickly. But to your point, you don't need to go in at a 250K budget starting out, and certainly not a creative budget either. So always advising clients, to be scrappy, right? Think about assets that maybe are working on YouTube and social, et cetera. How can those be kind of up leveled for the TV format, so that we can get you on there? But yeah, to your point, there's no one size fits all. You do want to really consider kind of what are going to get you stat sig results and what are going to get you the learnings that can really make it a scalable channel long term for the brand.
Sean, I'm curious, like when you look at the brands that are coming into Tatari and end up scaling really well over time, what kind of signals does that cohort of brands have when they come and test? Because I think like just hammering a little bit on what we were just talking about with these offers, it's it's almost like the meal kit companies just trying to steal a customer from one another to get that first purchase, but there's no real retention behind that offer. And so I'm curious here, like what do you see when you see clients coming in? Like what are the traits you see around a brand where you're like, all right, this is going to be a legit brand, like a Jones Road is going to come in and test with a meaningful budget, and this is the right partner to come in and test, versus just like, all right, these guys, they want all these features for $500 and spend.
I think Cody kind of mentioned this, but I do think that brands need to be effective on search and social and executing at a pretty high level, as they're coming into TV. So they're not just coming into it cold, right? And they're not just scraping by, so to speak, right? They've kind of, again, figured out product market fit, margin, revenue, et cetera. That helps. As far as other signals go, I mean, again, if you are starting to see diminishing returns, or kind of diminishing audiences on some of the other channels that you've been cranking and growing the business on for a while, then that's a sign that TV may be a great option too. And then for those first few tests, again, I mean, you want to be able to invest enough money to gain the learnings that are going to unlock this channel for the long term, versus just a flash in a pan, $5,000 test or something. It's really not going to give you much. And again, especially if you already have, some noise and a lot of other channels that you're running on, right? So you do want to make sure that you have an investment that kind of matches where the brand is at and where the long-term goals are, et cetera. But it's not a one size fits all again.
Yeah, makes sense. Going off of that, Cody, I'm curious when and where you started to see that point of diminishing returns, which made you start to think you should look outside of, kind of the core strategy we're running across Meta.
It was the year we did like 105 million one year. So it was that year we were growing, pretty quickly. But along the way, again, definitely like had like a few months where we were plateauing. We were like 80% paid social, and so it was very heavy, and kind of diagnosed it as, a reach issue. And, dabbled with some other things, like tried to run reach campaigns in Meta, but like they're just, I don't know that should have been the best strategy there. It was kind of like, just trying to band-aid it, but we really needed like another place where we could reach people and put budgets and continue to scale. And so that was it. And I think part of it, like I just naively, ignorantly is probably a better word, like assume that like we weren't ready for it, just because I didn't really know any better. And when I started talking to people and hearing like it wasn't this like big behemoth that like we had to be a giant brand to do. Like we were ready. There were smaller brands than us. Like often brands get started, that like I was talking to like $50 million brands that get started and like it was very successful for them. It's not, I just in my head thought it had to be this giant, production and fancy thing.
What were the signals that you saw that made you think that you are hitting that point of diminishing returns? Was it just like inefficiencies were starting to go up, or you felt like frequency was getting really high?
Yeah, exactly. So just seeing like reach get worse, seeing, not able to kind of scale in, so losing efficiency when you tried to scale, reach getting worse, frequency going up, all that stuff. What was really cool when we did launch, so like there was this clear like halo effect. So we use North Beam for attribution, and one of the things we would look at, and this was a challenge, was new visitor rate was just going down and down, right? And when we launched TV, like just shot up. So our overall efficiency was really good, but like without even changing anything on our paid social strategy or creatives, I think it just brought in this new audience that was just like really, brought in this new audience into our funnel and maybe gave it some credibility. So paid social converted better, but also like was reaching many more new eyeballs.
Yeah, it makes sense. Sean, is that kind of what you see also on your side as brands are coming in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that mention there of the halo effect is really important. So sometimes it can take a little bit of time as you start out on TV to build some momentum. There's some clear signals right away you should see, which is kind of an increase in branded search, traffic to the website, et cetera. But eventually you start to see that pressure kind of down funnel and your campaigns on Meta start to convert at a higher rate. Your retargeting pools become larger, et cetera. And so we really are trying to gear at Tatari, our campaigns to drive those signals as soon as possible, right? So that brands can kind of see that and feel the impact as soon as possible.
Yeah, makes total sense. Cody, can you tell us about the first ad you ran? I think you ran it on Christmas, right?
Yeah, we launched, good memory. We launched, I think, on Christmas Day. Yeah, so we launched with like a few different creatives. We did one shoot and I always try to be as efficient as possible. Launched, linear to start.
As the guy who's, notoriously cheap about where you're spending your money, how did you decide to launch on Christmas versus, the first time I launched TV, it was like we're launching the overnight remnant buys on like the gifting networks and all of that. So how'd you decide to go, just start on Christmas?
It was remnant, the first one, right? Like I remember being at my family's house, my like brother-in-law's house in Miami on like Christmas Day or day before it. But it was on like, I don't want to say Lifetime, but it was on like one of those channels, like you would never watch, but it was like
You're
so
like making everybody sit around Lifetime TV.
Yeah, we did for a 15-second spot or a 30-second spot. But it was definitely remnant. I think, part of it was timing. I think part of it was, we thought there was a little arbitrage, kind of that like Q5 period. People are, sitting around. So it just could be a little bit cheaper CPMs because, that's when people are sitting around having time to kind of watch TV, not at work. So we thought it was like a really good time to start for us.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in there. I think remnant is not a dirty word, right? I think it maybe sounds like it means that it's like cheaper, lower quality inventory, but particularly in the TV space, this is the same inventory that some of the largest advertisers in the world are spending, a gazillion dollars on and upfronts, et cetera. There is just, of course, a portion of that inventory that goes unsold. And so it is smart sometimes to start out that route to find efficiency early.
Yeah. Is that how brands mostly start? Like what's typically the path for a brand that's coming in and wants to start? How do they make sure that, they're not like spending a ton of money out the gate, but also they're not spending not enough, but also, they're not buying bad inventory or not focusing on exclusively smaller sets of inventory because it's more premium?
Yeah. So it does depend on the brand and kind of what their target audience is as far as how we would build that initial pilot campaign strategy with regard to, how much on streaming versus linear and whether we're buying programmatically or we're buying directly, et cetera. But, we would go in and basically take kind of a balanced approach. So for Jones Road, right, you want to be on some of those larger tier one cable networks, your Bravos, your E Entertainment Televisions of the world. But then there's those smaller networks that hit that same demo. And we have, research to support that, such as Lifetime, et cetera. And want to make sure that we're on some of the smaller networks, the larger networks. And again, in that remnant space, we're able to effectively bid essentially at a rate that we think is fair and is going to clear the spots, but in kind of the most cost effective way possible. So it's kind of this balancing act. We want to make sure we're delivering spots on the networks we think are going to matter and we need to gain learnings on. We don't want to pay necessarily top dollar for it either. And that's something that our model at Tatari has really been able to execute effectively with a lot of data over time and identifying what is the right rate to pay within the remnant space.
Yep, makes sense. Now, going off that, one of the things that TV companies are very particular about, just like food companies, is how they write about the inventory they have, whether it's, organic versus all natural versus natural. And TV, it's like programmatic versus TV versus CTV versus fast. And so I'm curious, like, can you explain all these acronyms and just tell us a little bit about like, what do people think they're getting? What are people actually getting? And for example, how did Cody's plan differ than what people might think they're getting themselves?
Yeah, there are way too many acronyms, too much jargon out there, which is notorious in the ad tech space. I mean, at the highest level, there's linear and there's streaming, and linear is that more traditional TV that people think about, that cable subscription or the broadcast networks you could get on the bunny ears antenna, right? Your NBC, ABC, et cetera. Streaming is really anything delivered over IP. OTT is somewhat synonymous there. And CTV as well sometimes gets referred to that as well. For the audience, I think it's important to realize that they're just considering what they're watching TV, right? They're not going and turning on their TV and going, oh, I'm watching Paramount Plus. This is TV. Or I'm logging into my Spectrum or satellite, network account, and this is TV, right? It's to them, it's that viewing experience. And that I think gets kind of to the heart of what we talk about with convergent TV. That fact that there's these different kind of services and platforms and delivery methods. But at the end of the day, it's all TV. And there's from a media buyer standpoint, there can be importance to any of the pieces of that puzzle, right? So for one brand, it may be really important to be more heavy on linear than streaming, but there's still a place for streaming, right? Or it may be important to be on the subscription streaming services because their demographic and their product, but not on the free ad supported platforms, right? And so that's something that we, really try to educate the brands that are new to TV on, and then come up with a strategy that's tailored to them.
Yeah, makes total sense. And Cody, as like somebody who came in from the digital side, no TV background before, were these formats different to you, or how did you decide which ones to approach first?
They were very foreign to me, and I would hear all the things and I'm like, what's CTV? What's OTT? So I had to like do a lot of research, listen to a lot of podcasts to even like understand what a lot of the acronyms are. We decided to go linear again, a demo, right? We felt like our demo was watching linear at the time, and then, CPMs, and then just, my strategy going into any new channel is just use my network, talk to as many people as possible. So, talk to people like you, like Greg, like talk to other brands and just see what they recommended and kind of put the pieces together. Cause, you might have one person saying one thing and whatever. So that was it. But I think just based on the CPMs and based on, we thought we could get to, some decent scale before then introducing, like a streaming or a CTV, which is what we did. And I think that worked out pretty well.
If you've ever wondered how the top brands actually run TV, here's Calm on why they use Tatari.
At Calm, we treat TV just like any other digital channel from a KPI standpoint. Well, so we look at how many people we are able to kind of reach with our offering and product. Down funnel metrics like cost per install, cost per trial, and kind of the North Star metric is the profitability metric, which is ROAS, the return on ad spend. With Tatari's ad platforms, we were able to measure our business outcomes across both linear and streaming, and then we're able to independently verify it with the data that we see on our end and our back end.
That's what real TV performance looks like. To learn more, go to nick.co/Tatari. And Sean, on like the streaming and CTV side, and I guess even all of it, like, there's also the upfronts that happen, which is where the real premium stuff gets sold. Is that much different than what I'm able to get here from Tatari, or is that different than what, some of the other CTV vendors are getting?
Well, again, going back to that conversation on remnant linear inventory. So it's some of the same inventory, but certainly in the upfronts, there's some opportunities that are kind of carved out there and sold, exclusively, and or they get all bought up, at that moment. But for the most part, we're able to access, the full range of TV that's available. And that's what sets Tatari apart from some of the, more self-service kind of CTV only programmatic platforms that are out there, which only offer a more limited sliver of the inventory that's available.
Yeah, I think I saw it's like 20% of what's actually out there is what you get from most of the other DSPs?
Yeah, I mean that I don't know the exact figure, but that sounds like definitely what it could be.
Yeah. And when they're offering things like free ad credits, I guess to both of you, like, what are your thoughts there in terms of like testing something new? Sometimes they're matching ad credits, sometimes they're just giving a dollar amount. What are your thoughts on those offers?
I'll go first. I mean, to me, it's icing on the cake. Like, who doesn't want credits? I'll definitely take it, but it's got to be part of a strategy. It's got to be like a reason why. And again, we tried and we had mixed success. We actually had a great first test with one of the programmatic partners, and it was one of our more efficient CPAs. And then we tested again, and it was wildly unprofitable. And I think part of it is the inventory issue. It was good at the beginning, and it's just not a sustainable strategy. And obviously, could never get an answer from them on it. So we ended that experiment as quickly as we could. But I think it's not anything to just get swayed by. It's like it's not going to take you into the black if you're in the red. It's icing on the cake, but really it's like, what's the right strategy for you? Who's got the right inventory? Who's got the right platform? What's the right channel for you to be on?
Yeah, I would agree. It's an opportunity to test something, and it should be regarded as that. And obviously, anything for free is nice as well. We just want to caution any advertiser out there to take that as a TV test, right? I think sometimes, and again, going back to the fragmentation and all these different opportunities and the scale of TV, right? I would feel bad for a brand if they're like, oh, we tested this one, isolated platform or this one limited sliver of inventory and it worked out or didn't work out. And they think that's it for TV, right? Or they walk away. And I think in my experience, we've allowed brands to go do those tests, right? If they want to, and they want the free ad credits. And sometimes they come back to us and say, hey, well, this was a learning experience. We actually want, to be able to buy everything that is available in the TV world. And Tatari can provide that. And I don't know, Cody, if you had that experience or not, but.
Yeah, we did. I mean, it was simple to buy. It was easier. It was very good pitch, credits, lower fees. We could do it ourselves, but the performance wasn't there. So no amount of poor performance is going to, is going to justify that.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about measurement here. So, previously TV was measured by GRPs and CPMs. I'm curious, Tatari being the more performance marketing platform, every D2C brand, wants to basically see scale and results, and then they have to take those and ladder those up internally. What are the metrics that you guys are looking at as Sean on your side as the platform, and Cody on your side as the actual buyer, and then the chief revenue officer or the signer of the next chunk of the budget?
Sure, I can go first. So GRPs are certainly kind of a legacy way of measuring TV. I had to learn about them. So I came actually from a social background. And when I started at Tatari, that would come up sometimes. Again, it's not how we are generally looking at things. It's essentially just a reach and frequency equation against TV or household population in a given area. But ultimately, we find, and I'm sure Cody would echo this, that it's more important to look at outcomes when it comes to TV and make sure you're measuring things, not only just impressions and reach and frequency, but those website visits, sales or registrations or whatever kind of mid to lower funnel conversion events are important. And so we tend to kind of focus on that, first and foremost, and let that data drive things. But yeah, curious what Cody was leveraging when he was there too.
Yeah, we're a bootstrap D2C brand, so like awareness is great, reach is great. I don't have budget for it though. I never had like a awareness budget, brand budget. So for me, it's a performance channel. Yes, there's going to be a halo and everything else, but we got to be able to measure it. So obviously there is the in-platform attribution. I think it's definitely good and directionally helpful. My just skeptical rule of thumb is never allow anyone to grade their own homework. So you have to have your independent ways where you're doing it. And so, there's no one right answer. Everyone's going to talk about triangulation, but you got to do it. So post-purchase survey is number one, right? And you can kind of get, some idea of CPA and, multiply, right? If half the people are taking it, multiply that, by 2 to get like the exact number of people to sell you there. And, you can kind of do some analysis where you're looking at that and then looking at like different touch models of it, right? Different attribution models with the post-purchase. That's helpful. Obviously, later down the road, we had media mix model, and so that's probably the best way to measure TV. And then obviously, I'm a big incrementality guy, so whenever we are able to, it's slightly harder on linear because you pay a CPM premium. So there's definitely a cost of doing that, but that's like to me the holy grail. And then generally looking at things like looking at organic and direct traffic as your TV budgets change. So I call it baseline revenue. It's essentially anything that's not direct paid revenue and traffic. And you should see search go up. You should see traffic go up from those sources, revenue go up from those sources as TV budgets are scaling. So just think it's important to build some reports and build some dashboards for them as well.
Was there anything, Cody, that came as a surprise to you in terms of what you saw go up as a result of TV being turned on? Whether it was a direct sales channel or things that came outside of that.
The impact of Meta, like what I talked about before, with having our percent new so much better, and just like how much better Meta performed, especially reaching new audiences. I think it just gave this fresh new signal. Like I don't even know that it was like people that Meta was retargeting that saw TV. I think it just gave this kind of fresh new signal of an audience that we were able to reach and actually provide like signal to Meta's algorithm. And then we also our Google brand search volume really spiked. We were probably spending $1,000 a day before that, and then we started spending like $4,000 a day. And so we actually ran like a incrementality test on brand search prior to that. Wasn't really great, but we weren't spending that much, so we'll leave it. And then when it spiked, I was like, all right, let's test it again. And I figured it was going to be very incremental then because a lot of people were searching, right, from TV, and it actually wasn't. And so we decided to cut it off, which was a little nerve-wracking. But what we saw is almost all of that traffic went to organic search. But definitely there was very clear signal. Like that was, not a TV thing, but there was very clear signal that it was driving search. Like very clear as we scaled budgets, it was driving search.
Yeah, and super high intent search too. If you saw there was no difference between, the ads running for branded or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Sean, on your side, I'm curious what you see as in terms of clients. Like, I remember hearing a couple weeks ago at Hudson's Mastermind, one of the founders turned on TikTok Shop. All of a sudden, target sales jumped, by 2x in the next week. And I know TV has a very similar TV, and I feel like TikTok running organically is almost a version of like Gen Z TV to some degree, like a very powerful version. So I feel like they have a lot of parallels between the two channels. I'm curious what you see as like halo effects that hit the other part of the brand outside of just the direct to consumer or just TV.
That's a great question. I'm not on TikTok, but that's the first time I've heard someone use that analogy, and it kind of makes sense to me. Yeah. So as Cody mentioned, you'll see that kind of clear impact on branded search, but I mentioned before, like on Meta, you'll typically see that folks will convert a bit better too. We actually at Tatari, with the pixel-based attribution that we leverage for our platform, we're able to kind of monitor, paths, et cetera. And we have seen, across clients upwards of almost 50% increases in conversion rates from people that are visiting the site after coming through the social path, Meta path, versus those that had not also been exposed to a streaming TV ad, for example. So just showing that the power of that additional touch on the biggest screen in the house, right, will drive more conversion and more intent from the folks that are also seeing you in their feed on, these other social channels. So really cool things. And to your point with Target or also Amazon, right? We do see that certainly a lot of the purchase lift and traffic will go into Amazon too, from TV. And so that's something that we've actually been building a model for too, and adding into our platform to try to get that complete picture beyond just D2C for brands.
Amazing. Yeah, one last thing I want to touch on is I'm curious how, like, more tactically, how are you guys handling measurement? I know Tatari's got a suite of measurement tools internally. And then Cody, it sounds like you're also doing some stuff outside of the platform. How often are you continuing to run those tests? And what does that setup look like?
The actual test, not that often. Again, especially linear, like your CPMs are really going to go up if you do a local test. So linear is much more challenging. CTV is a lot easier to test. Those might be quarterly, and it depends on what answers you're trying to get. If you're trying to validate some of the other sources, or really figure out how much do we have to scale, how efficient is this really. But if you're using a media mix model, usually that's looking at monthly. And I would say, me being CEO and probably with CMO when we launched it at the time, like I'm probably looking at it weekly in terms of looking at the different sources and how it fits into our total channel mix weekly. And then it's not like a social where you can just change your budgets every day. Like generally monthly, as we would run a media mix model and figure out allocations, we're giving our budgets monthly to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I liked what you said about not liking platforms that grade their own homework. And we certainly have seen most brands have other proxies, right, that help them understand TV and their broader channel mix. Question for you, Cody. I'm just curious in your direct experience. I know you mentioned you started with linear and then it sounds like you added streaming. Were there differences, I guess, in the way that you were measuring those two, or the way that you felt those in some of the other internal attribution models that you had?
It's a good question. I don't know that we saw the same halo effect of the meta performance improvement when we launched streaming, but it also could have been that just because we had been on TV for a while, like maybe if we started with streaming, maybe we would have seen the same thing. So I don't know that we saw that, but I think we saw performance fluctuate. Like we would look at the same sources and stuff. There's a little bit more that's available, obviously with demographics and stuff on streaming, but we'd see performance fluctuate. Sometimes linear does better, sometimes streaming does. So as we're running the models, we'd look and check, and some of it is audiences and who we're trying to reach.
That makes sense. I think the delivery of a linear TV spot is just inherently different than streaming, right? So it's delivered one to many. And so sometimes we'll see kind of clear spikes, right? Just after a spot aired, this traffic is coming to your site or searching for your brand more clearly. Whereas streaming is delivered on a kind of one-to-one, more user tuned in basis. And so it's spread out a bit differently. So sometimes, there could be some different challenges from that versus linear. So yeah, I'm curious if y'all tested any kind of larger linear spots and felt halo effect from that kind of down the line or with more premium opportunities.
Yeah, that's a good point. We never did any giant ones, but even with the ones we did and with your guys' attribution, methods, you can definitely see the spike in traffic from there. And you just don't have access to that with CTV because it's, this is the one time it goes live.
Yeah. Well, going back to our earlier conversation, I think that again is just one of the key, reasons why you want to think about the full TV puzzle of linear streaming and the different execution types in order to see that halo effect and feel those different impacts of it.
Yeah, I guess on that notion, a brand that's going to start building their media plan today, maybe going into the rest of Q4, maybe planning for Q1, how should they think about their split between linear, direct, streaming, programmatic, all of it?
It's a good question. Again, it kind of depends on the brand. So, and kind of what their demo SKU is, right? And we can use some different sources of data to understand where that we're going to best find those results, right? I think, I work with Manscaped, for example. And I've been working with them since they launched on TV in 2020. But if they were new to TV coming in today and we're trying to gear up for a big Q4, this would be a great time to start, right? We're in Q3. Let's get some learnings now so that when we get closer to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, et cetera, we know kind of what's working and where we can scale. So I would say it sees that moment. And depending on kind of what the available budget is starting out, given they have kind of a younger male SKU, I mean, I maybe would start at kind of a 50-50 split really between linear and streaming, right? Because we'd want to be airing on some different male sports networks. We would want to have an opportunity to buy maybe college football games, maybe some of the, not Ohio State or whatever right out the gate, but, some smaller kind of opportunities there for live sports. So we get a taste of that. Make sure we're also testing the top kind of streaming publishers that are out there, your Hulu, your Paramount Plus, et cetera. And we have enough kind of weekly budget to get signal there. And then carving out kind of a smaller part of that total streaming budget for programmatic execution. So we're typically starting kind of buying direct from publishers because we
it sounds like if you were using any other TV platform, you'd get like 10% of the media buy of what basically you're putting together here as like a great test to start with as a premium brand.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly, again, how we look at it. We want to make sure that we're getting the maximum kind of scale and the maximum kind of opportunity out of TV. So only, maybe 10 to 15% of that would be going to programmatic starting out.
Yeah. And Cody, like looking back on how you guys started buying TV, is there anything you would change? Or if you were, to do this with another brand and start again, is there anything you do differently in your process or approach to going live on TV?
It was pretty successful, so it's hard to say that I would do anything like when we launched. There were definitely some learning lessons along the way in terms of how we were allocating budgets and, analyzing performance. Like it does take some time to kind of understand the impact to your business. One of the things that we saw a lot of success with, like, yes, is the typical produced creatives, but also like adapting some social assets and there's, you can either edit them or there's some services out there that do it where you can kind of like punch them up, like Sean said, and like, give them borders and backgrounds and stuff like that. And those can, maybe they're not the most branded, but like they can actually perform really well. And I think things like that can actually help a lot of brands, start sooner than having to do these giant productions. And I think the landscape has changed a little bit in terms of, viewership. So I probably would go closer to like the 50-50 and test streaming and, and linear out the gate versus just going with linear.
Amazing. And I'm curious, like your takeaway on, again, going back to the credits thing, it sounds like you'd rather have a partner that can continuously deliver than a partner that's going to give you some, a few free shekels.
Yeah. You got to look at total performance and, you got to look at your fees. You got to look at your agency fees. You got to look at your, credits and whatever's going to give you the best return at the end of the day. And for us, we're on Tatari because that's where we're getting the best return.
Amazing. And Sean, somebody who's thinking about TV, maybe they're on the fence. You've already given kind of the reasons why Tatari is, just a far better, more robust platform, from the get-go, really, like even just thinking about inventory, not even thinking about measurement and all the other stuff. But what's something you'd say to somebody to get them over the fence and, like really encourage them to run a test?
Again, the barrier to entry is not high, right? So we can come up with a strategy and a plan that can work for any size brand, really any size budget, candidly, just to kind of get in there and start testing the waters. And again, the sooner that you can do it, the better, especially if your peak seasonality is coming up, right? You want to get those learnings sooner. And so that would be something I would encourage. And we let the results speak for themselves, right? And I've seen many brands be able to scale, grow on TV, and so I would obviously have a lot of confidence there, and would let them know that it's an opportunity that they need to make sure they're trying to work on. So
amazing. All right, guys. Well, that pretty much reaches the end of this episode. I want to thank you both for jumping on. Cody, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter, probably best place. Cody Plouffe on X, I guess it's called now.
Amazing. And Sean, if people want to, just pick your brain on all things TV, media buying, approach, etc., how can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Also, just my name at tatari.tv. If you want to email and drop a line.
Amazing. Thank you both.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next time to cut through the noise on CPG, retail, and e-commerce. If you enjoyed this episode, why not share it with a friend? And be sure to subscribe wherever you listen so you don't miss the next one.